Okay, welcome everybody. Hash Church 3.0, episode 21. So I will be going.
Etienne.
Oh, and Etienne is in the room. Welcome both to Wade and Etienne. Hope you guys are doing well.
Good morning. So far, so good.
Excellent. I just got to go share the channel in my YouTube, the new link that just went up. So give me a few seconds to do that.
You seeing some nice spring weather down in the Bay Area, Etienne?
So far, so good. Yeah, I mean, well, it's a typical between 50s to 70s, but you can definitely see the flowers on the trees as well as the grasses are growing. So signs of spring are here. And yeah, at night, Orion's starting to pass out here and we can see, Mars still pretty clearly. So yeah, we've been pretty lucky all in all.
True that. Yes.
Oh, but up there, you should definitely be seeing it warming up, yes?
Oh, yeah. Some of the plum trees have bloomed out. A number of the other fruit trees are blooming. They're not blooming, they're budding. The daffodils and the early spring flowers are popping. Lots of color coming back to the landscape, which is one of the beauties of spring. Yeah, it's happening. We've had about 3 or 4 days in a row of warm days, cool nights, and yeah, snow has melted, and yeah, like that.
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Josh.
Josh and Kelly. Oh, he's muted himself. Hi, Josh.
Headphones.
What's up?
You're muted, Josh.
Can't hear you, hippie.
I feel like there's someone we can't see. No, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there's 3 people entered the waiting room. Well, I better let those people in. Admit. They would probably appreciate coming in. So welcome to Dragonfly Earth Medicine. Josh is in the house. Colin's just popping in. Johnny fucking B is here, of course. And Skunkman Sam, a man who really shouldn't need an introduction, but there's a little one anyway. We stretching our necks out, guys? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, stretching my neck. How are you? My neck's been acting a little weird in the last 6 hours, so don't know why.
Jay Ruthie in the house.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going good, man. How about you?
Going good, man.
Dude, you're making me miss my regenerative hat.
I for the last 9 months, I'm like, I gotta mail him a new one, and I just have not done it.
What did I do with my old one?
I'll mail you a new one. I just got to get my act together. Somehow I'm mailing all the time, but
I just can't remember what happened to my old one. I wore that hat every day, like until it was.
It's kind of a good hat. I have like 6 of them that I rotate through.
Oh yeah, I use a lot of these ones, the Embark ones, but
yeah,
this Method 7 one's kind of nice. It's little, and I just wear what I have. But I miss the one, and I can't remember who sent it to me. I feel like it might have been like. I had the compost one that looked like Compton. And
that was dope.
Yeah, that was a dope one too. And then you hooked me up with regenerative right after that. Those were my 2 favorite hats. So welcome to the room, everybody.
Fucking, where's Sky?
Where's Sky? Now we hear him. He's turned his camera off and he's talking in the background.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Sky!
Stella!
Nice, easy, chill morning here in Hash Church. We got a bunch of folks in the room right now. I don't know how many there are, but I'm sure there's a few. I can't seem to see the numbers here like I usually do. Oh, there we go. There we go. Awesome. Well, I hope everyone's doing well today at the end of another week. I just spent 5 days up in Whistler myself, so I feel very regenerative. In fact, that's my regeneration. Humans need regeneration as well. to maintain sustainability. Plants and humans are very similar in that way.
Did you come out of your chrysalis?
Popped right out. It's spring. Spring is in the air. And for those of you that don't know, that is my time. I have a birthday coming up here in like 3 days or something. I'll be 48 years old, March 31st. That's my spring chicken birthday. Pretty excited about that. Not that I'm turning 48, but just generally the mountain turns into a wonderland at the end of March. We'll usually get one last storm. We'll get this really beautiful powder. And I'm hoping on making it up to Whistler for my birthday, as some of my best birthdays have been up there. My friend has dug out an igloo. Took him 3 weeks. He dug out a beautiful igloo up on Whistler Mountain, and he's been hanging out with a pine marten up there. This little cool little weasel creature has been coming up and visiting him and eating fruits and nuts out of his hand. And yeah, it's just all around super cool. So I'm looking to go spend my birthday with this little pine marten, maybe a couple of ravens and some whiskey jacks and some friends. We'll see how it goes.
That's really cool. Sky and Kendall and the kids went up to Kendall's cabin out near Valemont and snowmobiled like 80 kilometers out into the high country, and they were feeding pine martens too. There was a whole pine marten family that was in the house, and I mean they can be, a vicious little creature. And they're just the coolest paws, and they have these weird little noises, and they like almost like snow otters.
They have locking jaws.
The ermine are really cool up here too, which are white, and they look similar to the pine marten, but they're smaller and they're completely white.
Yeah, I've seen them on the mountain, which is incredible to say because they are next to impossible to see. But I have seen them on the mountains before, those perfectly white ones that just, you only see them while they're moving, and the minute they stop moving, they just disappear in the snow. It's pretty awesome.
We had the rare occasion of seeing a wolverine recently coming down from Revelstoke. And it was just this amazing creature, coming across the road. And I don't know if anyone knows about wolverines, but they're one of the most elusive beings in our forest. One of the other elusive beings in our forest is the mountain caribou. And the mountain caribou are also kind of threatened in this area. And there's a thing that everyone should know about called the Y to Y corridor, which is the Yellowstone to Yellowknife, or to the to Yellowknife up in Northwest Territories corridor, where they're trying to keep as much of an intact corridor of wilderness going up, to Alaska, to keep that flowing for animals. So the Purcell Wilderness is in that, and people should look into the Purcell Wilderness, and even Willett Wilderness Forever is an area that people are trying to make into the park. So please look into Willett Wilderness Forever and see if you can sign those petitions and just create more wilderness in British Columbia.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. My friend Bushy Wayne on Instagram posted a footage of, I don't know if it was wolverine or badger, but it was one of the two, and it was their tracks, and he was following it in his, I think it was in his plane, but it seemed like a helicopter footage. But you're just over this crazy, like forested, snow-covered mountain range, and you just see these tracks, and he follows them for quite some time. It's pretty cool footage for those of you that might want to check it out.
Oh, and also Bush Wayne is really cool and does amazing stuff in the mountains. And I know he's a friend of yours, Marcus, and his partner is important to note, Sarah, and everything. But amazing stuff that Bush Wayne does.
Hey, I wanted to shout out both Bingo Lombardi and 70s Mama, who have just been, they've been the admins in our chat room here in YouTube for a very long time. And I just don't think we give them enough props. 70s Mama's been away and we've been missing her. She just came on just now and said she would love to invite Wade Laughter to speak to her CSC students about Harlequin and CBD in general. I was lucky enough to speak to her students. It was very enjoyable. 70s Mom has been one of our longtime admins, and she's been taking care of the chat. So Wade, I can hook you up with her afterwards, and I'm sure you can help her out and do something wonderful together.
Thank you. And yes, I'd love to. I consider that the primary focus of my work is helping people understand what cannabis can do, in addition to the lovely benefit of getting us high. So yeah, please, Marcus, hook us up and I'd be glad to.
Yeah, shout out to 70s Mom as well. She invited me on to one of her classes as well. It was a wonderful, fun, easygoing experience. You'll enjoy it, Wade.
Totally. Another person who does classes is Selena Wong, who lives in Vernon, and she's been on Hash Church before, and she's had her own show on here, the Selena Wong Show, the Flower of Life Show. And she does a class with some local Native women. And I also did her class, and it was, I think I've done it twice now, in fact, and it was also well worth the time and energy. And I just thought it was great to meet some new folks and hear from them and help educate them on things that I happen to know. And so I'm sure Selena would be pretty stoked to have any of the people on the panel here, Dragonfly Earth Medicine and Josh and Wade and Etienne and everyone really. I think that you guys would do good to get in touch with her as well, because she's doing good things as well.
We're super in touch with Selena. We think she's one of the greatest people ever. She does do really amazing work, part of the spiritual community in British Columbia. And yeah, I'm pretty sure she has an online website that's maybe a dispensary of some type and everything. So yeah, it's just, she's a really beautiful woman. Awesome. We support her in every way. Just like to shout out Brandon and Amanda for down at Cush Kirk for this guava punch. We just made this guava punch hash at the house here the other day with Subsidium and the cannabinoid Lachlan and Adam and stuff. And wow, this guava punch came out like spectacular. Big up.
Looks beautiful, man.
Brandon
That
and
was
Amanda.
something they bred down there on their farm.
Yeah, guava punch came out of the guava and the punch breath. So we got the punch breath. Oh no, the strawberry guava. I'm pretty sure it's a strawberry guava by punch breath. Yeah, they gave us seeds last year. We grew them on the property this year. Pheno hunted it, cloned it, got it out to the community here in the Kootenays, and started making hash with it. You know, and it's just spectacular.
What kind
And, you
of
know, this other one.
what kind of hash did you?
Other one is really. Say what?
What did you, that looks like rosin to me. What kind of hash?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's rosin.
From flower?
I'm sorry. It's from hash. I made ice water hash out of fresh frozen, pressed it at 180 degrees, and have kept it, you know, perfectly. It's just it almost rips your face apart when you open the thing. It peels your skin back. It's just like,
a little guava. I have a little grape guava that was given to me by this one was given to me by Globby Johnson. And then I've got the banana pudding that was given to me by Pressed Out. They look very similar in color for certain of what you have there. We'll have to get together and have a little puff down soon. You're on mute, Josh.
Glue Pig from Josh Wax down in LA. The Glue Pig. He gave us the Alien OG, the Glue Pig, the Hog's Breath, and something else. And the hash just turned out really phenomenal. Or the rosin and hash both turned out really good from it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, let's have ourselves a little bowl here on Hash Church. We certainly don't snub our noses at some nice solventless oil, or for that matter, any type of oil. We have all sorts of different panelists that enjoy all sorts of different things here. We try to be inclusive and remove ourselves from these silly divisions that we get caught up in sometimes as human beings.
Josh, did you get to deploy any of the things I sent over to you, to the little notes here and there in the process?
So I just want everyone to know how stoked I am about Colin, because he shared with me some tech that was really, really phenomenal. And yes, Colin, I really appreciate that. I'm sort of in the middle of a couple runs right now, to be able to give you like the full, sort of reply on my thoughts on it. And again, I'm sort of somewhat new at it and everything in this last year, but yes, incredible work. And I think that has a lot to do with why the terps are so strong on it. I mean, in some cases, the terpenes are stronger than the flower was, and maybe that's normal. But in our case here, where the terpenes are just crazy in there.
I think you have an opportunity to, with the knowledge that I passed on to you, to retain a lot. And but I think we always lose a little bit. It's just where we're at. I don't, unless you're using a lab conico or things like that. I think and even then you're still, I don't think anybody really has any true data on it quite yet. But or maybe they do. I'm not aware of it. But I'm super stoked that you're able to utilize it and have fun with it, and make great medicine. I'm so stoked. So yeah, please give me some feedback. I love hearing, how it went. So thanks.
I feel like you guys are talking in code.
So I helped Josh with some freeze dryer techniques, and just gave him some pointers, and just armed him with the right stuff, and let him do his thing. And I think he took the sheet music and made some beautiful music, as I call it,
And is this something we're sharing with our audience, or is this something that we're keeping a little closer to our chests?
We're keeping it a little closer, but it's I just had to ask, because we talked about it for so long, like a while ago, and we haven't checked in on each other, and I just wanted to ask, because you pulled up that beautiful jar, and I was like, that looks pretty familiar.
The same reason I asked, because it was mentioned on Hash Church. I had to mention, like, are we talking about this? We can talk about it in the future. Maybe one day I'll invite a bunch of people on who use freeze dryers, and we'll spend the first hour just talking about settings and how to sublimate out the water. It's not as tricky as you might think. Depending on the type of freeze dryer that you have, it's just like anything. You learn the variables, and then you tune the variables to find the sweet spot. And how you do that is by making mistakes. And it's not that difficult. You make little mistakes. They direct you. As long as you're paying attention and you have that awareness, you'll find that sweet spot. Making rosin is no different. You've got pressure, you've got heat, you've got time. Those are your three variables. Now you're going to tune each of those variables in, and you're going to hone in on that sweet spot. And the sweet spot could change from person to person. Who knows? For me, it's always about definitely getting my yield, because I hate the idea of leaving things behind, but also preserving, the flavor as much as I can. That's kind of my process. We use a bunch of different freeze dryers at my work, so a freeze dryer conversation really would have to be with people who are using the same freeze dryers, because if you've got people who are using lab concos and people who are using freeze dry cos, the conversation's not going to be the same conversation. They'll be thinking that what one person says doesn't align with what the other person says.
And elevation, I find, sometimes has a big play into settings as well. So that'll change based on where you are geographically.
Also, Flynn from Wuxos Winery has some really good tech, and Ganja Gill is just bigging him up on his story not too long ago for helping him bring his dry time down quite a bit, and also continue to keep his quality up. So I think that, if you can keep your times down and times down, terps up. That's kind of
Fletcher got it down to 7 hours, but it's also, part of that is that his screens that he uses, that we've purchased, that insert into the freeze dryer, they have very big metal frames, and then they're basically screens that the hash sits on. So the sublimation of the water happens way faster, but it's also seemingly faster because you put a lot less hash in because of that big metal frame. When we first started, I can't tell you how many times I muffined out my freeze dryer, putting in so much hash that every single tray that I pulled out was like the hash had risen right to the top of the bottom of the next tray. And the cleaning of the freeze dryer when you do that is extreme. Like that silicone mat that is on the top, you know, freeze dryers tend to look like they're upside down when they go in. And that's because those heaters have a silicone mat that goes over top of them. And that's kind of what buffers the heat and controls the sublimation of the water. And so we used to, oh my God, we used to put like 3-4 wet kilos of hash into these things. And that's just too much. The amount that seems to come out perfectly is, you know, around 700 to 800 dried grams from a harvest right, at least, which is really the freeze dryer that 90% of people in the industry and community are using right now, because they're a lyophilization oven that is like really the most basic one that you could possibly buy. And because of Freeze Dry Co., who is the manufacturer for Harvest Right and makes all of those freeze dryers, they already had a business where they were creating freeze dryers for a variety of industries. So to create a little side hub where they could just start pumping out these very small little home units, really, even the laboratory one is more of a home unit than not, in my opinion. I got attacked pretty good on my Facebook page the other day when I mentioned to a friend to avoid using the oiled pumps that come with the harvest rights. And yeah, this guy just came at me fairly intellectually, you know, not very passive aggressively. I felt like he had just been, you know, under house arrest like all of us for the last year and was probably at the end of his rope. And he was like, I think I'll take it out on Bubble Man today. Like that seems like as good as any. And his argument was that you know, the oil pumps work fine if you know how to use the oil and the pump properly. For me, I love the idea of mitigating all risk when it comes to, and funny enough, you know, just as I'm about to talk about mitigating risk in a laboratory, Dr. Mark Chaldone pops into the room. So that's pretty trippy. Well played, Dr. Mark. Well played. I know you didn't hear what I just said, but I'm talking about mitigating risk in the laboratory. And the atomized oil from those pumps that, unless you have it piped out of your lab, goes into the air and is not good for humans, and is definitely not something you want to find on your hash. So I'm talking about, Mark, right now, why I think a scroll pump is a better idea than an oil pump
Oh
in
yeah,
any laboratory.
for freeze drying.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so that's basically the conversation. So, you know, first of all, the scroll pump is way more expensive, but you don't have to deal with changing the oil like after every batch, which in my opinion is a very large vector for potential contamination, because the oil is kind of invisible and it transfers very easily depending on your ability in the lab, and everyone has different abilities. And so that's one good way to mitigate that risk, is by getting rid of it. Secondary, the scroll pump in the long run will be the cheaper option, because you won't be continually buying oil to put into the pump. It costs money to do that.
And or a pump that breaks because you didn't change the oil when you were supposed to.
Yeah, well, it's all about there's water that ends up in that oil, and then you have to separate it, filter it out. They give you the whole thing, but it's nasty. There's no
Invariably, all of that pump exhaust should be exhausted like out of fume hood, because otherwise you're going to develop this film of stuff all over the inside of your lab, which you're trying to keep clean, but it's a greasy kind of grime that just ends up collecting everywhere, and it'll attract dust too, and dirt.
And why people aren't thinking about it is because it's invisible basically, and they don't. The one difference that they're not doing is doing microbial testing on their lab weekly, where you just swab everything and send it off and find out what's going on. If you're not doing that and you're just assuming, that's scary.
The new premium pumps, I'll just say, you can get like 20 cycles out of it without changing the oil. Not that I'm promoting the oil pump after everything you said, but the new premium pumps that come from Harvest Right don't have to be changed every single time. So that's a positive thing. But the squirrel pumps are great. Maybe someone could put a link of some of the squirrel pumps that you're talking about up on the chat.
Scroll, not squirrel.
Oh, sorry. Squirrel friend. Thanks for the squirrel pump.
Scroll pump.
Liboid is another great company. It has
Cole
awesome.
Parmer.
Yeah, Cole Parmer is also another
Cole
company.
Parmer is a good one. And yeah, I mean,
Liboid is what VTA uses, and you know I've have a few of them on some other devices, and
yeah,
their workhorses.
they're sometimes called diaphragm pumps, right? Is a diaphragm pump the same as a scroll pump? I think it's the same, right?
Definitely heard them spoken about in the same sentence.
Right. I think it's just, and so the fundamental difference between that and an oil pump is just the whole pumping mechanism is just oil free, because basically what you're doing is you're compressing and decompressing a diaphragm, which creates a vacuum, right? And if you have your valve set up right, as the diaphragm is decompressed, it creates a negative pressure or a vacuum, which again creates sort of like this pulsating kind of negative pressure, right? So that's why there's kind of like a noise to it, because the diaphragm's going back and forth, and it's only on the fourth cycle that it actually pulls the vacuum. Otherwise, it needs to push. So it's pulling and pushing, but you're only sort of capturing the pulling, so to speak.
Dr. Mark,
vacuums
you're
suck.
looking very Jerry today. You just
I'm
have like
looking
black,
Jerry?
yeah, like the black shirt with the hair. You just have
Do
this.
I act like Jerry too?
You just have this like, yeah, you just have the ism going, you know.
Hey, I just want to go back for 1 second on scroll pumps versus diaphragms, because I just checked it out. The scroll technology is based on smooth orbital operation, while diaphragm pumping involves abrupt cycling of the diaphragm's cylinder.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
But I believe they're, so are they both oilless, Mark? Are they both, they don't involve an oil?
I'd have to go in deeper. Scroll definitely does not. I don't think diaphragm does either. That use 2 spiral scrolls to compress air and vapor, move them towards you.
But you know, your point of oil contamination in the hash is still, you know, regardless, you want to basically use an oil-free pump. And again, oil-free pumps can only give you a vacuum of so much, but for just drying water, you only need that kind of vacuum. You don't really need a really, really deep vacuum that only the oil can give you.
And yes, someone in the chat just mentioned that the oil that Harvest Right supplies is not the best oil. Absolutely 100% agreed. But is there really a best oil to be anywhere near your hash?
Hash oil.
Maybe that's the only one. I like it. Well, people really enjoyed that little bit of the conversation. I will tell you, just from reading the chat, people were like, bring it on. I got my notepad out. This is important information, things that people are looking to save time and mitigate risk. And
so Mark, does Harvest Right sell a pump with their machine that they sell, the
they have
food
a
grade freeze dryer?
Oil pump that comes with it.
It's an oil pump. Oh,
yeah.
And they have an upgrade too as well, I believe. I don't know what it is. I just
scroll. They sell the scroll as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's $2,000.
Yeah, $1,400 US.
But it's not the standard pump that, so if someone gets a freeze dryer and they think that they have the thing that they need to freeze dry their hash, that's not the situation.
Well, they can get the job done. I'm not saying they can't, but it's, you know, it seems inevitable at one point that with all the risk, it's kind of like when you're back in the day before PF Tech came out, which is distilled water with spores from mushrooms in a syringe. We had to use things called transfer chambers, which of course Mark would know what that is, because it's a pretty standard thing in a lab when you really need to avoid this microbial world that we absolutely live in. You have to create a small chamber and kill all the bacteria in it and like go in with gloves and do your work in there. And so, you know, unless you're doing your oil changes in there, to me, I just couldn't take the risk. Every time I saw that oil, I just wanted it out of my lab immediately. And that's what we made sure we did before there was any problems.
It's really great if you could have kind of like your vacuum pumps kind of like in like a mechanical room area, that's adequately ventilated. And so if they do end up spewing stuff, it's kind of in a separate room from where your product is out and open, because those vacuum lines, they all need to be exhausted. And very rarely I'll go into a lab and it'll smell sour and it'll be kind of like, again, that grime. And it's like, you guys realize you're sending all that vacuum stuff. Vacuum doesn't just disappear. It's got to go somewhere, right? Ends up all over your lab, right? And you're right, those microscopic particles, I imagine a hash just could be a magnet for all that,
I'll tell you, and even worse so, how about if they're making rosin and they're actually pressing rosin in parchment paper, which we know, I think I've even shown it right here on Hash Church.
Yeah.
Even hash pressed in parchment paper, particularly touched by humans, seems to send and charge that thing statically. And so when the rosin is hanging in a band, you can take your finger and put it nearby and the rosin will go like this towards your finger, which means it's so charged.
I didn't know that.
It's literally, yeah, man, absolutely. Take some hash or some rosin and put it in parchment and like press it with your hands a little bit, and then open it up and hang it, and then go like this with your finger, and you'll literally see the rosin go like that. I've done it on Hash Church for sure.
The wide world of hash, man. That's totally fucking cool, dude. Tricks can you teach it to do tricks?
Well, you can, how about this? From a microbial or a contamination mind in a lab, would you want to see that shit like exposed in any way? Like it's literally pulling, charged, pulling like anything that's floating in the air. Like you just have, that shit has to be kept really, really clean. I think it'll take a little while, but eventually people are going to become aware of all these things as they make little mistakes in their labs and have their problems, because this is a relatively new industry and we're not all chemists that come from a chemistry background that were trained to work in labs, like.
I don't know. The best I could ever train my hash was to burn up in a small series of little fires. That's the only trick I've been able to teach it to. I mean, I put it on a little flechette before and flung it into a bowl, but that's about it.
I always feel like the hash is training me. Don't touch me this way. You're gonna get stuck all over your fingers, Colin. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Michael Pollan way of looking at it, Botany of Desire, for any of those of you who have read that book. It's an interesting thing when you think of almost like cordyceps infecting the mind of the insect to climb to the tallest tree so it can fruit and explode its spores to find more insects to infect. I sometimes wonder, like, is Skunkman Sam breeding cannabis, or is cannabis directing Skunkman Sam through some sort of... What do you think, Skunkman?
Wag the tail.
But botany of the desire, but desire is what binds you to the wheel of life. So I guess we all got to get away from botany. Maybe it'll just grow itself.
Well, I think I've always kind of convinced that is like man has always spread cannabis. No, cannabis has gotten man to spread it throughout the entire world. So yeah, I think cannabis is a wee bit smarter than some of us humans in some respects.
One of the things we're getting ready to do on the farm today, as soon as we're finished, is plant ganja outside, because it's a really good planting moon. What moon is it today?
It's Libra.
Why is Libra good?
Libra is just it's an air sign. It's really awesome for flowers only. You really don't want to be planting any of your veggies. That's for in the next couple of days when the moon moves into Cancer or Scorpio, moves into Scorpio in a couple of days. And then that's just going to be way better for your pumpkins and your squashes and all of your brassicas and things like that. Time to get those in the garden, as well as all of your peas and your spinaches. So in the next couple of days, but today is a really awesome day, and tomorrow morning for planting flowers. So I'm sort of half in and half out. Honestly, all I can do is look outside and go, oh, geez, it's a planting day. So
we're expecting
we're direct sowing everything this year. Everything. We're not even doing any little pots, no lights anywhere of nothing. We've just realized that we can direct sow with some greenhouse plastic over some stuff outside, and
if people look at
utilize the sunlight. Just seems like, you know, after 30 years of growing, we've just come to that. That's, you know, what's easy, and how can we grow gardens for when we're 89 or 90? And this is just the way to do it. We don't have to carry pots around. We just carry a little bag of seeds out to the garden and direct sow. It's been awesome.
The only plants that we may put in pots are some of the ones that we may want to keep as a male. We did think about, we tried digging up some of the males out of the direct sow, out of the greenhouse, and in some cases that worked. We had to put it in the shade.
We do that every year.
In a creek. We put it in a creek in the shade for a couple of days, let it like kind of come back to life, then repot it, then bring it up into a semi-shady area. And it's amazing. It keeps growing and it gives us pollen. And some ways I like that better than cutting the top off and putting it in a glass jar. But you can cut the top off and put it in the glass jar when it's fruited enough, but you have to get it fruited enough, and sometimes that means there's pollen going through the air. But you know, so it's good to have research and developing farms out there. But this year, you can look on our Instagram. In the last couple of days, we showed how we've prepared our beds this year, and we really like, you know, the ramial chipped wood chips and how they are going to feed our rhizosphere. And we really like the idea that when the seed germinates and the first root comes out, it's going to hit mycorrhizal spores and indigenous microorganisms, and then all the roots are going to grow through these birch chips that we have, and then the fungi is going to eat. You can see how easy it is for the fungi to come on and eat like sawdust and wood chips. So it's just going to be this total fusion of fungi and roots growing together. And I love the oil secretions that come from the way that the plant uptakes those nutrients, and it comes out in the hash. When you have a juicy, rich, gnarly soil substrate, it comes out in the hash, and the trichomes get more amazing, and the flavors are stronger and they last longer.
Somebody just asked too on the chat. I just wanted to address it because it's a super awesome question about planting. So they realize your temperatures at night are around 5 degrees Celsius. Then you can really start planting. That's just telling you that it's a good, or 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's just telling you, hey, you know, it's probably a good time to start putting in seeds. If it's going to be super wet and rainy and that temperature, you might want to hold off until the rains sort of pass. But when you've got optimal soil temperatures as well as optimal moon signs, somebody wrote in there that it's pseudoscience, but really the moon signs are what moves the ocean. The moon signs are what decides when plants uptake nutrients. Trees, we know when we look at when they're in a water sign, they uptake a tremendous amount more of water and different humidities during that time. Like, you know,
it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. And we've tried to do all different types of tests, you know, planting in a fire moon right next to one in a water moon, and be like, yeah, you know, we're really going to document this. Or sometimes we have to push it because you just can't get around it, and you have to plant anyway because we're running out of time or the weather. And we notice it's tremendously different when you hit it on the right moon as opposed to when you don't. It's
and
really,
Maria Thune is one biodynamic woman. I mean, she did tons of tests and proved, you know, that she even modified the biodynamic planting calendar into a more modern calendar. So yeah, now's a really good time to plant outdoors. You can plant outdoors under the sun. One thing, if you make hash and it has a little seed in it, you can put the hash out on your beds, you know, like the leftover leaf. While you're making hash, the seeds kind of germinate. They don't germinate, but they soak like you would a sprout. And then when you put the hash dregs out on this for the home gardener, out on the soil, like in a greenhouse, you know, you could do that for the last month. We've had dregs with seeds in it on top of soil. And soon as the earth temperature gets warm enough, sprouts come up. So there's some beds out there that have like 1,000 sprouts coming up, and these seeds have been frozen 50 times over the last 2 months because it freezes nearly every night. And what seeds go through is something called serotiny. And some, like through the winter, seeds fall in the fall and they go through this serotinous state where they go dormant. Even though they're starting to germinate, they go dormant until the temperatures come right. And cannabis seeds are like that. So you can plant a cannabis seed in colder temperatures than say you can put a clone outside.
And anyone who's a gardener knows that, volunteers coming up are so much more vigorous. They're so much more adapted to the soil around them. They're ready for the microbial life that they're going to uptake because they've already known it throughout the whole winter. And also, I'm still seeing on the chats here that somebody is talking about pseudoscience and they want the scientific papers. Well, let's go ahead and let's look back before industrialized revolution. The scientific papers on the moon signs and moon plantings were incredibly vast. You can go back to the early 1800s and way into the early 1900s before we started mechanized big agriculture that really is aligned with, not nature and not the moon. And, it's not really
Actually,
looking at natural sciences. So I just want to let people know that there's papers out there and there are a lot of comparison studies that will actually really blow your mind. I'll leave check it out.
I'll leave it here. Rudolf Steiner wrote 1 million pages of documents before 1920. Have a look at it. You can decide whether you think they're valuable.
I had a couple of questions. On that last thing, I can't point to the paper, but I know that in the forestry world, there's somebody who's been looking at what sort of harvest in terms of firewood and or lumber by weight do you see based on when the tree is cut? And trees that are cut in full moon, particularly in water signs, produce like as much as 40% more by weight at harvest. Is it relevant to cannabis? I can't prove that, but I definitely, I use the biodynamic calendar in the work here on the farm. Deep appreciation to Ms. Stone, indeed. And then I had a question for you guys. Do you soak the seeds before you put them in direct sowing in a greenhouse? Or do you water the soil to keep them moist enough that they sprout?
We just soak them in our mouth, and usually I'll count how many holes that I want to do. And in each hole, we'll maybe put 3 to 5 seeds. And we can do this and we can direct sow like this because we are breeders and we do have so many seeds and people gift us so many seeds. So we have this ability to maybe pick the very best female in each hole. So I'll sort of count all of the different holes that I want to plant, and then I'll count out the seeds. I'll put them in my mouth. I'll sort of suck on them a little bit. I'll make all of the labels and the name tags that is needed for those holes, and then I'll just plant them. So it only gets a pre-soak with saliva.
I would probably add that the most magical thing is that we use a Dowsing crystal, and this will be really great for the people who love pseudoscience. We use a Dowsing crystal over every one of our seed packages, and we truly believe in this. We lay our seeds out, in front of us on a table from all the people that we get it from, and we use a crystal, and you can get a yes or a no from the crystal on whether that plant, you have to ask an intentional, simple question. You have to say, is this, whatever you want, is this medicine good for me? Does this medicine make hash? Will this cure Crohn's disease, cancer, whatever it is? And you ask the question to this crystal, and that goes through. And so we choose our seeds based off that. Then we put them in our mouth to get the DNA, and then we'll roll it in lush roots, a little mycorrhizal fungi with our saliva on it, and then we'll put it into the soil direct, which also has indigenous microorganisms and all of the other living cultures that we've put into the soil. And then we wet the soil down, and then that's right, we let nature and soil germinate the seed. And it's our belief that if it doesn't grow out of that soil in that moon sign with that, then really it's not meant to be on our land and grown out with our intentions the way that we wanted to. And I understand if someone has specific seeds that they want to grow, there's other ways of doing it, but this is just the way that we do it on our farm.
And this is the way that we've come to too. And it also, we do a lot of tests and a lot of different observations, and we'll soak some and we'll put some over here, we'll try some in wherever. But you know, it's just good to always try out different things. And when you're rich in seeds or you're a breeder, then why not try out a lot of different mediums and a lot of different areas, and try to plant out of moon signs that are optimal and see what happens. You know, I think it's really awesome because people can listen to us here on Hash Church, or they can go and do it themselves, because I feel like the very best relationship that we can have, not only with nature, but with the cannabis plant, is to grow our own. And the reason why you put it in your mouth is because you're creating that relationship with the seed, with your DNA, with the microbiology in your mouth and then in the soil. You know, when we compare microbiology of the soil to the microbiology of our own body, it's totally similar. There's no differences. You know, what is in soil and what makes plants and trees healthy is the same microbiology that helps break down our own
and the seed coating.
Yeah, our own food inside of our body, which helps make us healthy. It's a cycle. You know, I think that often we're always looking for proof, and proof is always given in science when we isolate. And when we isolate things, we're only seeing it from a very small pinpoint place in a whole, you know, a universe of microcosmic possibilities. So I think that, you know, when we are relying on just pinpoint, you know, accuracies, I think that we are not valuing all of the possibilities that nature and humanity has to offer.
Someone asked how long we keep the seeds in the mouth, and you can keep the seeds in your mouth as long as really you want to. You could say your favorite prayer, or you could set your intention for that seed, and that's how long you kept it in your mouth. I think it's, again, an intuition.
So as you guys are talking, and that was just awesome, someone sent me this stuff a while back, and you're telling me I should like roll my peats after it roots in this stuff? That's awesome.
Mycorrhizal fungi, you know, if it's the spore has to touch the root in order
a living root
in order for the spore to come alive. So if you can get direct contact, if you can get direct
clone, I mean, once my clone's contact, I dip this into this. I just opened this right now as you're talking about this, right? So someone sent me this for ProMix a while back. So I'm just curious about it because now I'm really interested in what you're talking about. Sorry, I'm just running around. So I'm going to just get my clones, and when they root, I would just kind of roll that in some of this stuff, or is that what you're saying? And I'll just read this.
You know, and I guess what you do is you would make a little mycorrhizal solution. You could even use a little.
Okay.
Sorry. You could use a little cornstarch and water and make a little dip gel with mycorrhizal fungi and maybe aloe, and then you can dip your cutting into it, right? And so you put the cutting out. It has aloe juice and mycorrhizal fungi on it.
So it
then
helps
your
root.
It's just you want it wrapped around the stalk of the clone that you're taking. So when you put the clone in,
what you're saying.
Okay, I didn't hear what you said there.
Okay, sorry. Oh, my microphone's over here. So when I cut a clone, I would dip it into something like this first before I put it into the peat, and then allow it to root, but not after.
Inoculate the peat, the stalk, and when you transplant it.
Okay, so you do. Okay.
Yeah, as much as you can. Don't overuse the mycorrhizal fungi. And I would just flag, like with mycorrhizal products, you know, check the sourcing of the product. Some of that is grown on GMO substrate. Some of it's certified organic. So, you know, if you want to get
some of it is just single species. It might be only feeding, you know, yeah, it's just a single species. Polyculture is just super important. So, you know.
And we're recommending a living microbial cloning. You know, often cloning is used with fungicides and a sterile environment. The type of cloning that we're talking about is the exact opposite, where you make a living soil bed and you put mycorrhizal fungi and stalks in it, and when the roots come out, they're full of white hairs, and the white hairs are where the plant uptakes nutrients. So you're automatically getting an inoculation on your root, and that inoculation stays with the plant its entire life.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why it's important to get the mycorrhizal fungi root on there as soon as possible. Now, a lot of people do indigenous microorganisms and make soils that they're getting mycorrhizal fungi wild from the environment, and that's also recommended. It's also recommended. It's just, if you want to ensure, you know, the studied mycorrhizal fungi thing, you can do a very easy root dip or dusting of the roots in the very beginning, and then that will last its whole entire life. You don't necessarily even have to do it again, unless maybe 2 weeks into it, you could do another drench. And an inoculated root zone is gonna help your plant double in size, which is why we joke around. Lush Roots 840 that we have is 420 times 2.
Just for fun.
This is a great product.
I was just gonna say, you know, Josh, I've been using your product, and boy, have I seen incredible increase in vigor. The Lush Roots alone is really awesome. I did some really isolated tests with some Motor Breath 15, some Chem D, some Sour Diesel clones, and then just recently banana, you know, Strelnana clone. So I am seeing side by side results, and you know, I've always rolled my clones in mycorrhizal and then transplanted, right? But having this Lush Roots is really incredible stuff, man. It's you know, Johnny, if you should get some, man. It's really great. I plan on continuing to incorporate it into my whole regimen at this point. It's really phenomenal. So really beautiful work, guys.
Thank you.
For the first time, I listened to you guys talk about this for a long time, so I have to like change everything. I've redone the whole room. I'm looking at cutting new clones, tying things down. I have these products, and I'm gonna be like calling you guys daily, and I'm gonna come up for a visit. And you drive by my house a few times. I missed you on the Sunshine Coast the other day. You were there. I was there the next day, so it was kind of funny. I was like, saw Joel the day after, so I was like, oh, I just missed you guys. But awesome. Love listening to you guys. I'm just quiet here and taking the information again.
We didn't make it through Vancouver. We were fully feeling you, and we really wanted to stop, but we were like on this midnight mission after coming out of the coast and made it through, but we did have an amazing time.
And I wanted to touch really quickly on what Josh was saying about this idea of what is sterile, and the idea of bringing sort of half sterilized techniques into your garden. It's sort of like these half sterilized techniques too, you know, with the mask and what people are wearing, and like what is sterile, what is not sterile. It's like microbial life is all around us. It's everywhere. And when we call something clean, we tend to go towards maybe the science side of it and say sterilized is what is clean. But I'd like to sort of open up the minds to people on the idea that when you have a tremendous amount of beneficial microbiology on your side and you're working with beneficial microbiology, then that can be more of a definition of what clean is. Because we are, you know, utilize microbiology everywhere all the time, and it's on the plants that you're getting, if you're getting cuttings or you're getting clones. There's already an endophytic system within those cuttings. That's, there's nothing that's truly sterile. So when you're using a product like a dip or something that's used for rooting gels or something like that, that's a fungicide that Josh said. It's actually sterilizing everything around where you're dipping it, which means that you're killing all of the bacteria, all of the fungi, even the endophytic fungi, which is inside, or the cyanobacteria, which is on the outside of the plant. Where if you have a healthy clone, then you really don't want to be killing that, because that's your health, that's your vitality, that's the well-being in the plant that's going to go up inside of the plant and become its own healthy microbiome. So when you ally with this microbiology that we're talking about, like these endos and these ectos, it's really similar, to just allying with nature and getting that cleanliness from nature. So just a little thought there for everybody.
And healthy microbes eat pathogens as breakfast. That's their whole entire purpose. So Fusarium and Pythium tend to propagate in sterile cloning environments. This is why tissue culture has become such a big thing. Maybe Mark can talk, or someone can talk about tissue culture and how that's different than what we're saying. But I believe that, like Kelly said, a healthy microbiology system eats pathogens.
I was going to say I cut clones 2 days ago, so I'm going to go in, pull those out of the peats, make up this, dip it in there and put them back in, because they're probably just starting to swell a little bit. So I have that little window right now. Thank you so much for the lesson, because that's what I'm doing this afternoon. So that's awesome. I can't wait. Okay, time to do a dab. We got quiet for a second.
Le bon, le rit.
Do a little dab.
We had an amazing trip, we'll just say, and we got to visit Terry Willard and Alexandra on the island, and they're just such amazing people, and they're elders in our community. And they started, people should look into Wild Rose College. It's an herbal college online, and they've been just doing they even have a cannabis course now that they're doing online, which I think is really valuable to like the home grower and people beyond. It was really wonderful to see their way they've transformed their 6 acres and utilizing alternative energy and hugelkulture swales and polyculture diversity and all the different medicines that they're making. And going along the coast, we just
and it's just reminding me, I don't mean to cut you off, just really quickly, like, the world is a really crazy place. If anybody has a backyard or even like a 5 by 10 piece of land, gardening is so incredibly healing. Even if you're going to only grow like a couple of tomato plants and you can watch them grow, that means that you're outside, that means that you're with the soil. And I just am really encouraging people to have little backyard gardens or to share backyard gardens with those people who do have backyards, because we really believe that backyard gardens are going to be what saves the earth and it's humans. I think the earth is going to be totally fine whether we're here. Well, it'll be way better if we're not here, but since we are here and we do want to save ourselves, then I think it's probably really optimal that we all get into backyard gardening and growing our own food, so that we can be eating good nutrients and uptaking good microbiology, so that we have the ability to think outside of the box of which just science and media is teaching us. Something outside of that, I think will be really helpful for our species.
And building bird houses, bat houses, and minor bee hotels are a really good thing to do right now. We're going to build swallow houses because the swallows come back. I wrote a note from last year that they came back on April 15th. So I'm trying to prepare. I want to have a good amount of swallow houses for them. So creating habitat is also very important in a time when we're losing a lot of habitat.
I like it.
Peppers. Peppers are an easy thing to grow. And if you eat peppers, you got to clean out the seeds. So now you have pepper seeds, right? So they're so easy to grow. And, we just had a meal with peppers. And my daughter was so inspired. It's like, Dad, look, there's all the seeds here. I'm like, okay, let's go. All the different kinds of peppers you now have seeds for.
So many things we eat have seeds. And it is true, there are so many things we can save seeds from that we eat, and we often throw it away.
Yeah,
and,
well, with tomatoes, you
those peppers,
kind of eat the seeds, right? So with some things, you eat the seeds, but so we tried to actually strain out of some of the tomato pulp a few of the seeds, and it didn't really work out too well. So we'll just go buy those seeds. But the thing with us is that we live close to, and you would love these guys, Josh and Kelly, our local Amish farmer who, we've been buying produce from him for probably about 20 years now. I mean, and we've seen his business grow to where he's making packaged goods now and has dairy, which means he needs refrigeration, which when we first went there, they had no electricity at all. They were just kind of like a farm stand, literally just selling produce that was just freshly harvested. It's now more of the Amish market, the baked goods and dairy stuff and stuff like that. But yeah, man, they're totally regenerative farmers. You can tell because when you go there, you see it happening, and the whole family's involved, and it's so cool. They peacefully coexist we kind of live in Philadelphia creep suburbia, a suburbia from Philadelphia and Westchester and Baltimore, kind of like they all kind of creep together. I mean, where we live now 20, 30 years, well, like 20 years ago, we were here. So 40 years ago, this was all farmland. But the Amish basically run all of the local farms in this area. And they're just amazing, man. They just, and they're out there, they're growing hemp now too, which is really amazing too. But we try to support our local Amish guy because it means the world to him that, my wife is there probably 2 or 3 times a week buying our fresh produce. We'll buy our eggs and some of our dairy, not all of our dairy from him. But yeah, man, I mean, it's regenerative farming. All of their livestock practice is all organic and open range for like their chickens and their turkeys and stuff like that.
Mark,
they sell goat milk and goat cheese, which is really, again, probably unique to them, but well, maybe not unique to them, but it's so great that they can peacefully coexist and farm in 2021 by the methods that I think have been farmed that for generations. Go ahead, Sam. I'm sorry.
No problem. You know me, I butt into everybody. And I just wanted to say that if you want to save tomato seeds, 2 points. One, make sure it's not a hybrid because you can't save hybrid tomato seeds. Second, so you use an open pollinated old fashioned type variety. Second thing is you scoop out or squeeze out the seeds and you put them in a glass jar and let them ferment for a few days. Then you take them out, wash them in clean water, dry them, and you can use them next year, when it's ready to plant. But without that fermentation product, it doesn't work.
Wow.
Sam dropping the real knowledge here.
There you go. Tell me more, Sam, about if it's a hybrid, because I assume like when I buy tomatoes like at the grocery store that those are probably all commercial hybrid tomatoes, right? So is it
likely
true?
Yes.
Okay, so can you say what you said before, which is that you're not allowed to take those seeds from those tomatoes?
It's not that you can't, you're not allowed to. It's they won't reproduce like the hybrid because a hybrid, an F1 hybrid has 2 different parents, 2 different lines. And you only are reproducing the F1, which is it's not this an F1 hybrid. When you self it to itself, it'll produce 25% like the mother, 25% like the father, and 50% somewhere in between the two. So you don't get what you want. Whereas if you use like an heirloom variety of tomato, like Brandywine, well, that's true breeding. And if you ferment the seeds and save them, they will absolutely work wonderful because I've done it for decades.
And also the Roma tomato is one that is still somewhat a heritage variety that you can also keep seeds from, which is one of the most common ones in the grocery store that's actually still an old variety.
And what,
Well, we've grown Roma tomatoes for a while in this one area, and where the tomatoes have kind of gotten mature at the end of the season, sometimes we just leave them out there. They drop the seeds, and they just keep growing year after year. And
fermenting in the fruit.
Yeah, what a wonderful tomato that is. That's just, you could eat them just raw, just with salt and pepper. I mean, they're just, you could put them in sauce. I love those tomatoes. I love Romas are my favorite.
Wife's favorite is Brandywine. My favorite is Cherokee Purple. You can't beat it in my taste.
So, Sam, you mentioned not being able to start the seeds. Is there a reason why? Are they just not fertile, or what's the reasoning behind the hybrids not being able to be?
No, it's but they will grow, but instead of being the F1 hybrid that the parents were, they will be F2. And therefore 25% like the mother, 25% like the father, and 50% in between. And I doubt very many of them will be like the F1 hybrid that you bought in the first place because it was so wonderful.
Makes sense. Thanks for the
explanation. You know, Mark, I loved what you were saying there about supporting the local Amish people, is that you're also supporting your local biome. And what everybody is talking about here, and when you're getting those cheeses and when you're getting those veggies, you're supporting your own healthy microbiome, which is inevitably your own healthy microbiome, which is really awesome and intelligent to do. And also what we're talking about here with germination of any kind of seeds is, what is it doing in nature? So tomatoes are really awesome. They come up all over the garden as volunteers. And when they do that is when a tomato drops off of the plant whole, and then it overwinters and it's rotting or fermenting inside of its own serotinousness, sugars, carbohydrates, its own state. Then it has the ability, those enzymes eat away at the outside or the hull of the seed, which helps it to germinate faster in that environment. So whenever we're planting seeds, you know, you want to be able to think about, oh, well, what is it doing in nature, and how can I, mimic that so that it will have its best germination as well as its most potential growth possibilities.
It's absolutely true. I mean, some seeds have to be frozen or they will not grow. I'm not talking cannabis seeds. I'm talking about seeds of everything in the universe and other things. Yeah, each one has its own, like you say, if you see how they propagate in nature, that's probably what you have to do something to them.
We're growing a California sequoia, giant sequoia in our yard that was started by our neighbor, who's an elder arborist, naturalist, and he got the seeds while he was down in the sequoias. He brought them back, the pine cones, or the sequoia cones, I'll call them, brought them back up, put them in his freezer for 11 years. That's what he did, because that's how long it took. And then he took the seeds out of the freezer and propagated about 20 of them. And he's got them growing on his property. And now we have a giant sequoia that's probably around 10 feet tall now, growing in British Columbia. We also have the Dawn redwood growing on our property, which is the redwood from China. And for so many years, in America, and North American and European botanists used to think that the only redwoods were in California, but then I believe it was the 30s, botanists were traveling the world and studying species, and they came across this firewood. This was the story I heard. Someone could maybe prove me wrong or something. When they found this firewood and they said, wow, this looks like redwood, can you take me to where the tree is? And they took them to the tree, and they're like, holy, this is like a type of sequoia. I think it's Sequoia meta something, and that's the scientific name. So it's called a dawn redwood, and this redwood loses its needles in the fall, and then it grows back in the springtime. It definitely grows different, but like the larch tree or the tamarack over in this area, those are the two conifers that I can think of at the moment that lose their leaves or their needles in the fall and then grow them back bright green in the springtime. So yeah, we were able to propagate unique conifer trees on our property.
Sequoia redwoods, when I was young, my mom took me to Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Parks in California, and they sold little redwood trees growing about 6 inches tall. You could buy them for like $5 from the camp. It was part of the forest office gift house.
Yeah, you can still get them. I belong to a couple of local bonsai societies, and they have, spring where everyone will bring out their sprouts, and they'll do a little exchange, as well as you can buy certain trees or some starters. We've got an Oakland bonsai as well, because they've got a full-on redwood bonsai here, which is part of the National Bonsai's Western Docents, which is actually here in Oakland, California. So they have an amazing program, and as well as the first female bonsai master. She went to Japan and studied, and she is here. She's such a fucking badass. She's amazing. Little trees.
Dab time.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Danny and Alice in Mallorca, these incredible people that hosted us some years ago. A couple of friends of mine, Los Gardens was with me, and Neil, who was just a longtime good friend of mine who grew all that Where Is My Bike that I used to press, and he's the grower behind that. And I went and visited his grow a few times and did some things on him as well. But we went there, and they were the most gracious hosts. They had a little shop there. And he was growing spectacular herb that he was selling at his shop. And he really sort of showed us around the island of Mallorca, gave us the history of it. And we rented motorcycles and cruised all around these epic areas in Mallorca. And they just had a second child. So just after we had left, they had their first child, and now they just had their second. So he says, yes, we have Sky, who is now 2, and Austin. So I just wanted to shout them out. They're just such awesome people, growing beautiful fruit in Mallorca with a beautiful property. If you've never been to Mallorca, I would check it out. It's a very unique island. It's a destination for cyclists and motorcyclists, because one of the areas that we went on had this incredible road that the closest thing I ever saw to it was in Switzerland, and Switzerland certainly isn't like a tropical island. So yeah, it's just, across the water from Barcelona, in between Africa and Spain. And it's definitely a cool spot and a worthwhile spot to go check out. I don't know if you guys still have your shop over there, Danny, but if you do and you want to say the name, I'll gladly shout that out as well, because if you do go to Mallorca, I would suggest supporting Danny and Alice in all of their business.
Yes, shout out to the Balearic Islands. Beautiful thing. Yes.
Super beautiful. I feel blessed to have gotten to go. Sa Calobra, right? That was the motorcycle ride. If you guys want to Google Sa Calobra, Calroba, that is the road that you can see on Mallorca. That, of course, we had to ride motorcycles and rip. Oh, John was there also. That's right. John was also on that trip. Neil and John, as well as Los Gardens and myself. So much fun. All right.
So I want to kind of bounce back to a second for the redwood there that was found in China. Do you think that goes back to Gondwana land when it was all one landmass and one of those things that was left in a pocket per se? If because I always kind of wondered if cannabis was kind of spread around via Gondwana land per se, but because it was never originally found in North America, it was seemed to have been found later on here, but in other parts of the world. So it's always been kind of fascinated about the one landmass that is kind of always spread out in the flora and fauna that have survived in regional
In California, we also have the coastal redwoods,
of which you used to harvest in, right?
The coastal redwoods are the Sequoia sempervirens, and the Sierra Nevadas are the Sequoia giganticum, I believe. And I think that's a really interesting hypothesis, ATN, and I totally agree with that. I mean, when we're talking about plants and trees, we're talking about millions of years of evolution and survival. And also, we know about dragonflies. For example, there's giant dragonfly migrations. People should look up dragonfly migrations. In some cases, dragonflies migrate 2,500 miles across whole oceans and stuff. So other things do too, and I think that birds and different things do have the potential to carry seeds vast, long way distances, especially if they catch a headwind or something. They find themselves 1,000 miles away in a few days. I think seeds can travel like that, but I like that hypothesis of the continuum from the landmass, with seeds.
Kind of curiosity.
Last week on our psychedelic renaissance course, that it's a 6-week course, and it was the 5th week. The speaker was a guy named Mark Plotkin. I'd never heard of Mark before, but he is a student of Richard Schultes, who certainly is much more well known. Richard Schultes was the Harvard ethnobiologist who went down to the South America and Mexico and discovered all these use of psychedelic plants, including ayahuasca ceremony. I think if it wouldn't have been for Schultes' work, I don't think it would be as popular today as it truly is. So Schulte is certainly a pioneer. And Mark Plotkin's got a podcast called Plants of the Gods, which I think is after Richard Schultes' books that he wrote with Albert Hoffman. And his podcast is extremely informative. And the reason why I brought it up during this discussion is because it talks about, ceremony and ayahuasca ceremony and how it's connected to the culture, and it's something that you can't just necessarily reproduce in Berkeley, California in a clinic. It just doesn't, you can't do it by Zoom. It just doesn't translate very well, right? And as much of and if all this work that Schultes did and that now Plotkin is now documented, just shows how important it is to conserve this biodiversity that exists down in what's left of the Amazon rainforest and elsewhere, all other native areas that humans haven't deforested or completely, somehow changed the natural biology of what's going on. Because I'm convinced there's a whole treasure trove of chemistry and molecules down there in plant species we don't know yet. Because it's funny, there's certainly definitely an awareness from the indigenous cultures. In fact, there's still cultures today that exist today that have had no outside contact with the Western world. And to me, I was to hear that, to know that there are still cultures today that have not had contact with the Western world, to me at least was fascinating to hear. But the other thing is that just the areas that they're living on, are increasingly getting smaller and smaller. But thank God to these conservation efforts, people like Mark Plotkin and he's involved in that whole Amazon Conservation Society, which is, again, a huge thing that's just trying to keep as much of the biodiversity that we possibly can and learn it in a way that doesn't totally exploit it commercially, but in a way where, again, we can understand. I mean, there's all kinds of clinical work going on around DMT, again, partially because it's one of the active ingredients in ayahuasca, that coupled with the monoamine oxidase inhibitor harmaline. So there's something that's happening there that monomolecular medicine that we've talked about here on Hash Church doesn't quite get. So there's things and there's clues that these indigenous cultures have, and these shaman know, and they know, and really disease is a manifestation of some off balance between society and the environment, and they've figured it out. And how ironic that, here we are in the 21st century, we're looking to them for answers to solve our problems and disease and hunger, and we're going to the shaman, and we need these places to basically still exist. And I was in a clubhouse room the other day, again, where they were talking about clinical use of ayahuasca to treat, behavioral disorders. And it's just amazing that we're at that point, but I don't think that that's a true, manifestation of like where the medicine comes from and what the experience is all about. And I think some shaman is just counting some money because he just made a whole lot of money by selling out. But I'd be interested in what everybody else thought on that. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, it's interesting how, it's partly the shamanism has been sort of marketed a little bit, so maybe that's just a human thing, but it reminds me of Terrence McKenna and Dennis McKenna and Wade Davies and Ethan Russo, different people that have gone, made their life out of going to South America and trying to find plant medicine and see how it can pertain to ours, also psychedelic plant medicine. It reminds me of Papua New Guinea and the diversity on Papua New Guinea and all the tribes that live there. And I think these tribes have allied with diversity, and they've allied with nature, and they do have the key into the unknown. And we know by searching tombs and using science to find out about different compounds that are, say, on mummies or whatever. And, they found cocaine on mummies in Egypt, where cocaine was probably from America. So you would think for millions of years, these native cultures were in total contact with each other and probably sharing medicine. I don't think you can really stop humans from traveling around. So I like that there's a nature magic still. I like that we're in a modern world. We can use science in a way that we choose. And I like that there's still nature magic out there that reminds us that, nature is producing these healing compounds, whether science proves it or not, So in some cases, our intuition can lead us towards health. And this is why I feel we've dedicated our life towards nature and natural healing and stuff. So I appreciate you saying that. And we were recently given some ayahuasca bark to take with mushrooms. A little bite of ayahuasca bark with psilocybin really changes the psychedelic experience of it. And, I like that these medicines are coming into our modern world.
Well, he was telling the story about, I forget the species of toad, but the toad that they lick, right? And he was showing a picture of that toad to another tribe that was thousands of miles away and completely isolated from them. And his contact there was like, "Oh, we got a toad like that." And he goes, No. This toad is from on the other side, over near Peru by the coast. This isn't this. He goes, No. We got a toad like that. And certainly, sure enough, this guy showed them a toad that also produced the same kind of psychedelic effect. So they identified like a new species of toad down there that they could lick. It's so crazy, man. So it's like, yeah, it's like, what else is out there? I mean, there's got to be. And again, I think that if those cultures go away, if somehow the Western civilization pollutes it just down there, such that there's no more indigenous culture, all that knowledge will go away. And that is fundamental knowledge that has been passed down for generations and generations and generations on how to live in a using all of these plants and fungi. And if there's something wrong with you, you go to the medicine man and he can make it better, whether it's a cut with an infection or whether you got the fever or whether you got malaria. I mean, they have all the cures for everything to live down there. It's amazing to me. So Paul Stamets is the speaker tomorrow. It's the last class.
That'll be
So it's the finale is they bring Paul in at the very end.
That was our conversation, because someone mentioned this in chat. I believe it was Fried Piper when we were talking about the botany of desire, who said Paul Stamets said that mushrooms are probably cultivating us. I wanted to add that to the conversation.
They sure are, man. They sure are.
Well, that's not actually very far off at all, because if we're made up of trillions of microbiology, I mean trillions.
380 trillion. Oh, wait, more.
380
Way
trillion more. That could possibly be pathogenic, and the rest is sort of infinite. So if we're made up of all of that, then these are all thinking, living, breathing, exudating, eating beings that are highly intelligent because they are still here in numerous amounts. So I always say, you might as well join the microbe revolution, because there's a lot more of them than there are us. And also the other thought is that, everything that you're sitting around, people talk about plastics and how it's bad for the earth. And yes, all of that stuff, it takes so long, but every single thing that feeds us, every single thing that we type on, the fact that we're looking through this computer, everything came from the earth. And I just think that that's interesting. If we take that mindscape and I just know that when we're gone, the microbiology is going to proliferate and totally take care of that, because the earth is what made it. Of course, totally out of balance with humanity, but still, it's just a really interesting conversation that, when you take plant medicine, seems to come up in the, cerebral cortex of, a discussion to set the mind to. So I just think that it's really interesting when we talk about closed loops, and when we talk about the earth, and we talk about how we're all intermixed and involved, and how science is related on such a small microcosm, point that we have to express, and something we have to, explain, but it's such a wide observational experience that's getting us there. So I think that it's important that we don't just doubt or let go of that intuitive observational experience that we're having to help guide us to, a much better place than we're in right now, because we have that ability, and the plant medicines continue to show us that. Sorry for the rant, but it's big out there.
Everything is going to degrade except for fluoropolymers. We don't know what happens to them. They seem to last forever. So fluoropolymers might be, so Teflon, right? Dental floss. Yeah, so billions of years from now, the only thing that will exist from us is the Fukushima radiation and dental floss.
Those will be our footprints.
That's right. The Fukushima dental floss era.
I can only imagine how many times we've gone through this cycle and don't even have any idea.
Wouldn't that be an error, not an era?
Era.
We learned from Paul Stamets that there was, and I took this course on Cortez, that there's been 5 mass extinctions. Obviously, he didn't make this up, but he was teaching it to us. There's been 5 mass extinctions on Earth where it damn near wiped out all of life on Earth. And the last one, I think, was called the PT extinction. And what he was suggesting was that life on Earth came back from, the BC coast area, and that it repopulated the Earth. I mean, maybe there's some more there, but I like that, even during mass extinctions, the Earth repopulates itself.
And the Hopi have the same prophecy that they say that this humanity is on its 5th stage of humanity, and they believe that we came out of the rocks. So if there was some kind of a big cataclysmic event of heat or something that made it so the Earth was inhabitable, it makes sense that we would come out of the rocks,
and
the ones that did survive. So
there's a super interesting, the Prophecy Rock. People can look up the Prophecy Rock down at Four Corners in the Southwest, and it talks about, where humanity goes in 2 different directions. And it might be interesting that we're in an area like that right now, where there's just 2 types of things going on. And I like the idea that we're, connecting with indigenous cultures. Mark, I'll let you say something again, because I think that we can all take on getting local plants, and native plants back onto our property, and bringing in more native plants into our polyculture is really important. And working on connecting with First Nations and native cultures, even in North America, where we are at the moment, cultures native all over the world are very important. We've been recently contacted by GW's Smoke Break and the family there to work with the Lakota, in South Dakota. And and if that works out, it'd be amazing to be able to collaborate with native peoples to bring, to help enhance their, what they have to offer us, because in so many cases, that's been wiped out through residential schools and reservations and all this stuff. So
colonialization, but
it's
the
a breakdown
information
of,
is still there.
Yeah,
I think that we have the ability to still retrieve it. And I think that the retrieval of that information is going to come from the Earth, because she's always been interacting with us. That's the funny thing. We, if we think about that, like, we're interacting on certain levels and in certain time periods, but the Earth has always been interacting with humanity, or with the planet, or with the plants and the animals that are on it. So there's some kind of a resonant, everlasting, higher intelligence.
It's there for the taking.
That's like the all-knowing, and it's totally there for the taking.
All we have to do is allow it in. And on that note, I believe we have to take off and get our seeds planted. We want to give so much thanks for the people out there in the community doing amazing things. Also, we had a beautiful tour here in British Columbia, and I think we should give thanks to a few people. Kootenay's Finest just became a micro license here in the Kootenays, so big love to them. I really hope success for the families here in the Kootenays.
And really showing all of the work that the community is doing here to, step into the system to try to make changes here, to make it so that the legacy market still has a place and still has a voice in the industry. So big ups to those guys who are doing really amazing work. It takes so much time, energy, and money to finally achieve a license. Yeah, and Kootenay's Finest has done it.
Thanks to Che.
Thanks to Che. Living Soil.
Thanks to Che at Rosebud. You can look
another
at Rosebud.
Outdoor LP. We went out to his property. Another Coots Vibes. Doing really good things for the community and with
what were his cultivars? Because I've been talking to him lately. Was that like Sarah's Secret and stuff?
Sarah's Secret. So wait, we have some rosin from
smelling.
Here.
I have some bubble.
Yeah, well, this is just what I have in some parchment here, and the Sarah's Finest is looking really, really good. And Sarah's Secret, which is very fine. Yeah. Is grown outdoors here in British Columbia, here in the Kootenays, and it's a really beautiful outdoor varietal that hashes really well, and you can look forward to seeing some good topicals and different things coming from that farm and the collective of co-op here in the Kootenays.
Yeah, we've been definitely talking. I've been
Yeah.
talking to Che. I've been talking to Logan at Dunn. I've been talking to just a few different local, even Patrick, his new LP. I've been talking to those guys as well. I of course want to support all the local craft growers that are. I basically want to support all the growers that are getting to that level, that are at a point where it's like, yes, this is what everyone needs. So let's make it accessible. So yeah, I'm really glad you shouted those spots out and continue
and
on.
Suzanne with White Grizzly over in the Slow Can, amazing woman. All of the ladies in the Slow Can, totally in love with everything they've done.
Yeah, still carrying the vibes here in the Coots, still making it happen. And also we're going out to plant seeds because our big goal in and has been for a whole lot of years just to be planting fire, unbelievable genetics that everybody in Canada and northern climates can just put in a small amount of soil, and it grows beautiful, amazing, dank flowers. So that's really our focus and our goal, because we still really believe when you grow your own, you're getting the most medicine out of the plants. You're having a beautiful relationship with your own medicine, and that's really important, as well as you're getting out in your own backyard. So everybody in Canada, you can plant your 4. Let's get on it. Let's get out there. Let's plant your 4. And you can watch so many hash churches on what to do with that 4 and how to turn it into amazing medicine. That's what all these incredible educators are here on this panel today. So let's really exercise that right of plant medicine.
And just a couple more. Daniel and Brishna with Earth Wolf Farms over in Lillooet. Big love and support
just
to you
putting
all.
out some hash.
Big love and support to Earth Wolf Farms. Just wanted to give love to Flav 421 over on Sunshine, Joel, the whole family over there.
And hey, I wanted to give a shout out to Cannon Nerd too for bringing us this amazing. We've been hanging out with him. A Sunshine Daydream, like a really old
or Eternal
cut.
Sunshine?
No, Sunshine Daydream from Bodie. Just a really long
14-week flower.
And just, like it's all that I want to have right now. So big ups to the really long flowering and patient growers.
And Subsidium Secreto, Subsidium out from Ontario came and helped us. And I just wanted to give love. They really gave us a lot of help with our, hash life and everything. So just huge love to the community.
And
there's
everybody in
a beautiful
the chat,
community.
like, wow, you guys are amazing and so intelligent. Everybody in the chat is just coming up with great things. And I can totally understand why it has ebbs and flows. Right now, we're in a world of ebbs and flows. And I think it's a-okay to all be ourselves. And just, it's nice that everybody gets here and is together. And just thanks so much, everybody, for still hanging on to the cannabis community, because we do have a culture, and I just appreciate you all more than words can say. Really, I'm going to be thinking about all of the cannabis culture as I'm planting seeds today. Thank you so much for all the inspiration and the love and the guidance and the education and the expertise and pushing it forward.
And the collaboration.
When it is really hard to push it forward. I appreciate you all so, so much. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, guys. We appreciate you as well, and have a great day in the garden, putting those seeds into the soil.
Speaking of the culture, we're actually defining that because, as you know, I'm working with the Veterans Action Council, and one of our members, Michael Crouch, has been working at the United Nations, and we're actually working on submitting questions and our green paper to the United Nations. We'll be submitting that this week. But one of the things that we have found is that the United Nations accepts cultures, and especially specific cultures. So across all treaties. So we're trying to define the cannabis culture because, as we know, it's been defined, and we're trying to define it from more of a world perspective as opposed to a U.S. perspective, even though the U.S. has had its influence on the culture. The culture of cannabis is worldwide, and as we know, crosses every socioeconomic region. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But yes, we're going to be relying on the culture at the UN level, because the persecution of cannabis is, done nothing but help us perpetuate our own growing cycle, our processing styles, how we ingest, how we use, pass it to the left, all these different situations. You come together. Cannabis seems to be rather communal. We come together in circles, how it's produced, etc. So it's going to be very interesting to see as we challenge things culturally, because there is a cannabis culture. It's definable. It's actually malleable in shapes, from regional names, from genetics, to even what cannabis is, that have crossed, I mean, how many different generations? If I say to Wade and a skunk man, I say a lid, they understand it, but my generation doesn't know what a lid is per se, or why the term lid came from cannabis in the first place. So it's just also fascinating how through the ages, from going back to the term muggles as opposed to other different terminologies that have been cultural subsets that have crossed every boundary around the world to continually maintain things. I mean, look, even as a culture, we all kind of gravitated and met where? In Amsterdam, because there's a huge culture of cannabis there that was happening, that they were, growing, judging, et cetera, and those things that have continued to spread out. I mean, Cannabis Cup wasn't the first one to ever judge cannabis, but it was a cultural recognition spread out through a magazine, etc., that drew us to a destination where we all met and continue to perpetuate this. So it also goes back to the discussion, did we perpetuate cannabis, or did cannabis perpetuate us to, proliferate her as well? So just some interesting cultural distinctions and understandings that we're going to be pushing to try to liberate things worldwide further. It's stuff.
Yeah, trippy thoughts for sure. Always in that cycle. Are we perpetuating it, or is it perpetuating us? Probably a nice balance of the two, no doubt. And obviously that would depend on your perspective, which seems to depend on your attitude. All these filters that we put in the way to perceive. I guess that's what this experience is. It's all these filters and this 5 cents prison that we seem to be.
Yeah. And back in the day, we used to say, who are the Grateful Dead and why are they following me?
Right. And the answer was?
Drugs.
I don't know. Where's the next show?
Right. I like Etienne's answer better. Drugs.
That's why I went. I mean,
Shakedown.
we couldn't get good drugs where I mean, you could get drugs, but you can get good drugs, or the drugs dude, you wouldn't believe the mushrooms you find on Dead Tour. You wouldn't believe the LSD they've got on Dead Tour. And, it just drove people there just, sociologically, because of, bad access. If you're new into the drug scene, you're the old people in town don't know who the fuck you are and aren't going to deal with you per se. Those are things that are earned, again, culturally, how we even access or allow access to certain, levels of cannabis. Early on, we had access to shitty Mexican. It wasn't until we earned respect that we, this is Kindbet. Oh, now this is the sellers of Kindbet. Oh.
Shakedown Street, man. I mean, imagine how many kids were like, well, where are we going to get the mushrooms? Oh, we'll get them on Shakedown Street. Shakedown Street? Tell me more.
I mean, literally, one of my first memories on Shakedown Street is this dreadlock hippie walking up holding this Amanita that was literally this big, this huge tray, just mushrooms. Just like, oh, I think I found the spot. Yeah, I loved it. I didn't dig the music, but I appreciated the culture. I mean, there was always some bus at the end with somebody with a huge chalkboard, with somebody who was calling out from the show, like, okay, they just played this. And then they would mark down on the actual chalkboard what song had just played inside the show. So people could be like, oh, outside in Shakedown Street, like, oh, wow, they're playing this. This is so awesome. And they'd literally go around and then play the song that was on from some other show that was recorded.
Probably the night before.
It's really fucking trippy. I mean, I've never
So this
seen
was
such an
during
organized.
the show. You were outside the venue in the Shakedown Street area
Yeah.
while the live Grateful Dead show was going on inside
Yep.
in like Oakland Coliseum and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, many times. Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
it's very common, you know, because I just didn't dig the music. I mean, I dug the scene, I liked the people, but you know, it just didn't carry it for me. I was a punk. I
yeah,
liked hardcore. I liked jazz. I grew up in jazz in New Orleans, so I appreciated the free flowingness of it. It just wasn't my thing. But the scene and the people that were there, I mean, that was the only place I could literally be walking around tripping, see a guy pop open a huge Tupperware jar, just brimming with the fattest fucking weed I've ever seen. And like, hey brother, can you spare a bud? And you know, he'd be like, sure, dude. And then just fucking chucked a bud right fucking at me. I'm like, oh, thanks, bud. And fucking went over to a tree at the end of Shakedown Street, sat under the tree, you know, in the shade, and just kind of smoked a bud to try to come down. Oh yeah. No other place could I have done something like that and be a fucking punk with my jacket and, you know, my tattoos and shit like that. Hell no. But the Grateful Dead accepted us all. It was kind of weird. Loved it.
yeah, Deadheads are pretty friendly, pretty open to anything, you know. If you didn't cause any problems, you know, I mean, occasionally they'd get skinheads in there and they'd have to, you know, have issues, but for the most part, yeah, it was a free for all party. For those of you who don't know, what we're talking about is before, after, well, during and after Grateful Dead concerts, they would just have this traveling circus of many thousand people that would just come around and make a living off of selling food and alcohol and shirts and frisbees and bowls and crystals. And if you could sell it, I remember seeing things like just lighters and papers. I mean, if you needed papers at a Grateful Dead show, you went down to Shakedown Street. There was some head shop down there that was set up on the back of their Ford truck, and they had all kinds of papers and bowls. And yeah, you
Don't forget glass pipes.
Yeah, glass pipes. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. We see like Marvel Slinger and those guys out on tour with their you know heady cases full of glass and you know flashlight to you know sell pretty heady pieces. And yeah, it was a whole scene that kind of developed around them. And in some cities, that was the reason why the Grateful Dead weren't allowed to come back, because they're like, oh my God, it's fucking travelers circus of drugs. And then, you know, all the high school kids in the area would catch, oh, we could go to the Grateful Dead show, stock up on all kinds of drugs. They'd buy acid and buy, you know, all kinds of drugs. And then there would be all kinds of problems for months after the Grateful Dead have left town, because there's this whole wake of, you know, you know, it was fun. It was back in the day. It was so much fucking fun, man.
It was
man.
a wake of freedom. That's what it was. Yeah.
Well, it was a real life adventure, and you know, way before it got really big. Like I started seeing them in the late '70s, and like they were still on like Saturday Night Live. Like I was there the night that John Belushi came out on stage and sang with him for a song. Before that was in 1980, and you know, it was just back then in the early '80s. It wasn't a big thing. Like people didn't really know about them. And like you'd go to an arena and you'd be able, like ATM was saying, you'd be able to smoke weed in an arena normally, where if you were at a rock concert, they'd bust your ass for smoking weed. It was just a different set of rules for when the Grateful Dead came to town. Bill Graham and the other promoters would say, hey man, this group, if you just let them smoke their weed, they're just going to, you know, they're not going to bust chairs. They just want to watch the music and come and go. And again, I remember being at Allman Brothers shows and at Neil Young shows and other shows where I had like a little one hitter and some guy was giving me the flashlight all night, you know, and you could be at a Grateful Dead show and just be smoking just all over the place. It was great, man.
That's the beauty of Vancouver, because all shows in Vancouver are a Grateful Dead show in regards to smoking cannabis. I'll never forget the last time I was smoking joints, which was a fair while ago. I saw Neil Young play a solo show at the Queen Elizabeth Theater, and I rolled like 20 huge fat joints, and I wrote the names of my favorite 20 Neil Young songs on those joints. And I was sitting in like the 6th row on the floor, right? Like in the Queen Elizabeth Theater in Vancouver, which is a pretty awesome venue. And I smoked one of those joints each time he did another song, and I think I ended up smoking like 14 of the 20.
How cool!
Yeah, it was awesome.
Neil's a
But I
great
started by
show.
the time the song was over, the joint was still going, so I'd have to pass that one down. And
Was it just him solo, Marcus, or did he have a band with him?
Solo with about 6 to 8 acoustic guitars, a stand-up piano, a banjo, and I feel like I'm forgetting. Oh, a baby grand. Definitely a couple of shows worth checking out. It was 2 nights at the Queen Elizabeth Theater, and I want to say it was like 96 or 97 maybe. I saw the Allman Brothers the same year at the same venue, and it was also a unbelievable, wonderful experience of just mass puffing in a super beautiful old school venue where everything's like sort of inspirational. You know, all the chairs are like red velour.
I mean, it's not a caricature, but I used to smell that herb at the Grateful Dead show and say, that's herb, not this Mexican brown shit. Or I remember getting Acapulco Gold back in the day, and it definitely had a different flavor to it. But like many Deadhead kids who are out on tour, we started smoking NorCal grown weed out on Grateful Dead tour, and there was no going back. They're like, oh my God, this is just a higher grade of cannabis. And the first time I smoked blonde hash was out on Grateful Dead tour. We used to always get like the red Lebanese or the dark stuff. I remember getting stuff where you could still see the stamp or the imprint of the hash, like the Turkish hash, you know, in the New York metropolitan area. But the first time I had smoked blonde hash was, out on Grateful Dead tour.
And this quarantine's got us missing concerts, no doubt. I'm going to cut it short today. We have 8 more minutes. I just wanted to let everyone know that. My son's down at the field playing soccer, and he's wanting Dada to come down and kick the ball around. And what could you imagine being better than after a couple of hours of hanging out with you guys and puffing bowls and enjoying some great dialogue? I get to go outside and run around with my 6.5-year-old son, who's just starting to get kind of cool with soccer. He wasn't really understanding before, but now he can run and kick the ball. And, you know, you just, I can see why pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. Not that I'm like super religious and follow the Bible, but be careful with that shit. The love you have for your kids is blinding.
It's the reason why you're a parent, and it's the best treasure that you have for all the headaches and all the sweating, and you're worried about, again, bringing someone into the world. I think being a parent is the best thing you could do in this life. And my kid just turned 24 years old, man. And to see him he's in the industry, Marcus, and he's out making hash and making a good name for himself. And he got himself a modulus bass. And I don't know. I mean, to those of you who aren't parents, I guess it's something, again, that you can't relate to. But that unconditional love that you get from your children.
Well, here's a good reason they might want you to, Mark, because if it's not us good parents having children, who will have the children of the future? God protect us.
Yeah, I always tell my kids, when you set foot out our front door, you're going to interact with kids who are parented a lot less than you. So keep that in consideration.
Be aware for sure. Yeah,
Thanks, Marcus. Thanks for again having an episode today.
Next month. So that's my eldest. So I turn 48 at the end of the month, and she turns 20, and then my son turns 18, and then my other son turns 7, all like in the next 5.5 to 6 months. Should be fun.
All blessings.
birthday parties.
Amazing.
Yeah, anyway, thank you guys all for coming out and sharing your time. As always, I appreciate it. I'm gonna go kick the ball around, but I hope to see you all next week where we can continue the conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Peace, man. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Bye,
Yeah.
Seth.
Love
Bye,
everybody.
Mark.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your Sunday.